Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying.
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast and the main podcast on a Monday. How are you? Hope you're doing very, very well. Hope you had a lovely weekend, whatever you got up to, whatever you were doing. We are here with another podcast. Very excited. Another week of transfers, another week of Arsenal madness, everyone panicking, all that good stuff, as always. George has got phone calls from Arsenal agents or whatever's going on. I'm here with my boy, George. You literally did. I mean, to be fair, I saw some news yesterday that Lucien Agume is linked to Arsenal. I thought,
mate.
We can't beat this guy.
I would love that so much. Oh my God.
If you don't know, Lucien Agume is a player that George has liked for a long time. There was some sort of tentative links. We're here. So there's no Rohan today, as you can probably hear. Rohan can't be here for various reasons. So we thought, what better time? Let's do a little mailbag episode. We've got loads and loads of questions from X and from Discord and stuff. We'll try and do all of the Discord ones. As always, you get priority access if you are a Discord member, which you can do by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. You get access through there. You also get access, just while we're on the sort of housekeeping things, to the data pod. We just recorded a brand new data pod with George, Data George, and too many, and Rohan. Looking at loads of stuff, loads of really interesting breakdowns into the game state situations where we're in, like how many shots we're taking in losing game states, winning game states, stuff like that. Really, really interesting episode. So make sure you go check that out. And we've also got a new kind of podcast series coming out on Wednesday with a new host. Everyone just cheered into their headphones. We have a new host joining us, and George will be supporting that. The weekly transfer roundup, and I'll leave that as a surprise. So very excited for that as well. But we're here to answer your questions. It feels only right, George, that on a mailbag episode you would take questions from X. It would be rude of me to take that away from you. So I'm gonna give you X and I'll take Discord. We'll try and cover everything because there's loads and loads of topics. I'll make sure we get to the most important stuff. And let's just get cracking. Go on, George. First question, please.
Okay, so this is from KB4MBE. I'm not going to attempt that. I think it's Big Coombs. Is Hernandez from Milan a valid overlapping option at left back that we should target? Milan looking to sell. He still hasn't agreed anything with Saudi either. Where do you stand on not even just the left backs, maybe answer the Theo question, but do you feel that the mental analysis is worthy? Because I think Leao will fall into something like this, in terms of, is this a type of player that we could take a chance on at this point in the project?
The mental analysis in the sense that, in what regard?
Well, mainly Theo Hernandez is somebody that I think has struggled, has a strong personality. We're looking at... I'm with you. Okay. I'm not too sure it's something that is a crazy fee, but the fact that he's going to Saudi Arabia, you can throw Victor Osimhen in this boat. There are talented players going to leagues that we shouldn't talk about. At some point, should we just assume, character flaw? Should we make that jump? Because I think Theo Hernandez is an overlapping left back. I mean, everyone's heard our Rodrigo video. So, of course, in profile, this is a player that would really work. But so would Victor Osimhen. So would, potentially a focused layout. What do you make of the hesitation from a mentality point of view? What do you make from the hesitation of a work rate issue or people going abroad? Should we consider these as just Saudi transfers? Where do you stand on the big moves there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think people know my general proclivities. I sort of hate doing too much sort of, that guy's got a character issue. Ultimately, guys, we don't know. We can triangulate, we can guess, we can maybe hear rumors, we might see things on Twitter, all these sorts of things, but we don't know these guys. It's very hard for me to say Theo Hernandez in particular. I think two aspects to this conversation, and I'll come to the second one in a second. I think as a character thing, look, I've learned very little in life, very, very little. The one thing I have learned is that people are rarely bad people or people who are, sort of inherently not a good person or a bad apple. I think pretty much, I would say 95% of the time, there's something unheard for them. And to go too far into my therapy speak here, I know people don't want to hear it. There's something unheard for them, and there's something that they can't necessarily express. But oftentimes it's environment. And relating this to football, I always feel we can go way too overboard with the so-and-so's a bad apple or whatever. Oftentimes it's about chemistry, it's about relationships, it's about being believed in as a person and as a player. So my natural proclivity, and maybe this is why I'm kind of more in on the like save me signings like the Rashfords and things like that, because I just don't necessarily believe in this idea that any player or any person really is I guess where this comes from, is unsavable and at a bad apple and whatever. I also fundamentally think that we have a really healthy environment. And when you're aware that it's often environments and players not feeling like they're important, not feeling like they're valued, or these sorts of things that causes these things, when you have a healthy environment like I think we do at Arsenal, I worry less. Again, that's without the specifics of the situation. If there's, criminality or whatever's going, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying anything I don't know personally, but I'm just talking more generally. And then secondly, maybe this is, I want to hear your take on that. But then secondly, on the sort of the left back situation, I think it's Hakimi is third for shot creating actions in Europe's top 5 leagues. Mm-hmm. Players aren't positioned, and I look at someone like a Theo Hernandez, and I look at someone who could potentially provide, not the same because they're different players, but a similar level of impact from a fullback. And to me, the conversation becomes, what do Arsenal, and you can't divorce this to me when we look at these types of targets from, if we're signing a Rodrigo, if we're fundamentally changing how we as Arsenal attack, what are we doing with our fullbacks? And maybe we need to have a whole section on that. But I think that for me is the big question with the fullback. I think Theo Hernandez as an athlete, when I look at his numbers, when I see the running power, when I see his forward numbers, I think in terms of a potential impact there. But that depends on what Arsenal want to do with their fullbacks. And I don't know if we're doing the same thing as it appears to be happening with Slot and so on. But lots there. So I'll give the floor.
So I think Theo Hernandez is one of those that is an asterisk player from things off the pitch that we'll be unable to talk about in full. But I think when you have a look at just a pure tactical sense, and you're looking at, to quote an Alex and close my eyes as I'm thinking through, the tactical thought of Rodrigo with somebody that gets him inside more consistently undoubtedly is something that I think we should and need to platform if Rodrigo's your pick. And I would go as far as saying that's a vital signing. In fact, with Rodrigo, I actually changed my priorities where I was really insistent on a third attacker. I think an overlapping left back is more important than the third attacker if we could do it. If you're talking about a fourth signing, even a right center back cover, the consequence and the knock-on from a Rodrigo is getting an overlapping left back, in my opinion. One capable, not necessarily of just holding width. Like, people, I think, are very stringent in the whole, oh, you want an overlapping left back, he's going to be the only one holding width. It's not necessarily that to be the case. Like, I mean, somebody that is an overlapper fundamentally underlaps as well. It's just a matter of who is going to spend more time in a particular zone, right? Like, we're looking at versatile players here. Like, we got to stop thinking of these black and white boxes that we put. And I find that sometimes the overlapping left back convo becomes a very rigid convo, which I've never understood. Like, people talk about inverted left back and say there's tons of versatility with Miles. He can operate in tons of different zones. He's able to go out wide, defend wide, be inside. Well, guys, an overlapping left back can do the exact same thing. It's about adding running power on the outside. That's one of your main skills. Miles has running power on the inside. So we need to be specific about what we would like, because have a look at the amount of running power we have on the inside. Calafiori, Miles. There is a lot left-handed from fullback positions that we've got in an underlap. That we've got in abundance. So recruiting another one, a Jarrell Hato, anything like that, like adding more of the same seems redundant to me. We need to have somebody more on the outside, and I think Theo Hernandez does that from a tactical point of view. As far as the character assumption goes, I am very uncomfortable with that. Like, that to me, assuming anybody is a particular type of way is something I don't like doing. I don't meet them. I don't know them. I shouldn't have an opinion on your character. I don't want somebody to listen to the podcast and assume I'm a horrific person or something based off of not knowing me, not having a convo, or having a so-called rumor that I support a particular nationality or something, which we've seemed to have found on X. But like, I don't want people making character assumptions about me. I wouldn't want it if I had that treatment. But equally, I do know that there are greedy people. Like, at the same time, like, I can't be ignorant. Like, I can't say, okay, I don't want to discuss it, so therefore I'm not even going to address it. I do know that there are people, and it's not even greedy. Like, I really want to push back on this. Like, these guys are providing for their family. If I had an opportunity right now to go to Switzerland with my fiance, who I'm now planning a wedding, and I've got 300,000 euros as an offer right now, or more, in order to change my family. Alex, mate, like, you bet I'm talking with my fiance, be like, hey, should we move to Switzerland for a year? Like, this could be really good for our future. And, you know, like, I'm very lucky to live a great life. I've been very fortunate in my life to not face some of the things that these players do face in some of the countries they do face it. So I can't even understand the pressure. I mean, I'm talking from a privileged position. I would be like, I'm damn well considering it, upping and rooting my life. But, you know, I think there is an aspect that we do have to understand from there. To get off the fence, I think that when a player who is in their prime moves to Saudi Arabia, and I'm talking anywhere from the ages of 26 to 29, goes there for major money, I say, good for you. But personally, if no top 5 club is able to convince you that you're able to come, then I don't blame the club for not pursuing. I'm not going to mention Victor Osimhen again. If he does end up going to Saudi Arabia, for example, as like,
Victor Osimhen.
yeah, like for example, though, like a player that I like, and I'm like, I don't know why we're not after them. If we find out that there's a freaking 850,000 euro freaking offer and he's considering it, I'm going to be like, mate, go secure your future, secure your family. I have no problem in that. But equally, I'm not going to say big clubs missed out. Like, I don't think big clubs are looking at that type of character to build successful projects with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, really, it's knowing your limitations as a fan and knowing what you do know and knowing what you don't know. And realistically, we're not insiders in the game. I'm not in Theo Hernandez's camp. I don't know what the situation is, but I think you hit the nail on the head with, really, it comes back to values. It comes back to, ultimately, I, as an Arsenal fan, would play for the club for free. But that doesn't mean that Theo Hernandez should come and play for the club for free. Like, and so I can't project that onto Theo Hernandez and say, well, why aren't you doing that? Or make an assumption on his decision or whatever. Ultimately, there may be, you know, not speaking about him specifically, but players who make those sorts of decisions, even going back, Oscar going to, you know, the Chinese Super League, things like that. Ultimately, you could say, well, you're just doing it for the money. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a job. Like, that's fine, is it not? Is that right? Like, it's a very football fan led thing to be like, I can't believe you're doing it for the money, because you're taking the romance and I get it. Coming back to Ten Hernandez to Arsenal, look, I think the point you make about Rodrigo is good. I don't know. I suppose I'm not saying yes or no. I don't know whether I see it as more important than the third attacker. It depends how we shape out. I'm still sort of assessing how I feel about that. But what I would say is, if we are signing a fullback in conjunction with Rodrigo, Theo Hernandez as a quality level is the level that I'm looking at. You know what I mean? Like it can't just be some kid who can run. You know what I mean? Like it can't just be that. So. Yeah, that it's really interesting to me, and it may well be. We'll probably talk more about Rodrigo in a second, but just here's the situation that from the little we know, I think what's going on is Rodrigo is deciding his future. That could be a massive thing. Ultimately, when players like this are available, as we say all the time, you change your plans. So this left back conversation might be one that we need to watch, and might be one that we need to have a look at. And actually, for us, we should probably have a look at some options as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know me. I've always got an encyclopedia of stuff with it. The only reason that I think I probably back up the third forward claim, because I was so hard into it personally, like I was one that was really pushing for it, is it's basically saying, if I don't record that, I'm not confident that Mikel will platform Rodrigo in the way that I'd like to see. And even if he did, I don't like relying on the fact that Calafiori must play. Like, I actually don't think Miles on his own is going to be sufficient enough of that running power. Like, you'll need the combination of Miles and Calafiori, and I don't want to rely on that for the entirety of the season. That would be actually a bigger point of failure for me than the Saliba or the Rice even, where I believe that these are big players that we still need holes with, but I think that there's a bigger likelihood that Calafiori misses out on some minutes than a Saliba or a Rice. So like when I'm looking at, oh dear God, like what do I need to do? I need to ensure that overlap is consistent, because I don't want my Ferrari in the garage for a majority of the season. And, it's not that he's useless on the wing. That's not the case whatsoever. But it's just you are not maximizing Rodrigo. You're not buying the Rodrigo. When you get excited about all the things that he does brilliantly, they're all on the inside. So I think he can do well on the outside. He'll give you moments. But if I'm not platforming him, we're going to have another conversation and another season in which I feel that Mikel's not platforming his attackers. And we've spent £80 million recruiting him from Madrid to be the main man. And he's not doing that. I mean, the whole logic of Rodrigo moving is to quote unquote, step out of the Vinny and Mbappe shadow. Why are we going to put him to a role in which he's been asked to do for years at that point and continue doing? Like, he needs to be valued and put front and center.
Yeah, and not to sort of promo our own stuff, but I do think that was really on the Rodrigo. Well, no, to promo our own stuff. It's the kind of podcast. It's the scouted that we did. Look, we all saw the performance against Miles. Like, that's where you can get him. But on the inside, we don't have a dribbler like this. We don't have a technician like this. Yeah. So if we're gonna do that, I'm completely on board, mate. It's really important. Yeah. It just depends. And maybe let's move on to the next question, because this is kind of a question, a more wide question. I'd kind of like to discuss various things. Let's do this first, because I want to talk about maybe the league in a second. So this is a question from Dinny on the Discord, which is, what do you predict will be the next tactical evolution or shift in the Premier League next season? For example, wide attacking fullbacks, a la Frimpong, Aït-Nouri, etc. And George, we are seeing, whether it's Kerkez and Frimpong and Aït-Nouri and all these sorts of things, we are seeing a change, certainly for Liverpool and City. Where do you see this? Do you see it as something to deal with trends in the league? Do you see this as to platform their attackers better? Like, how are you sort of taking this all in?
I don't know if you remember, like, it was back when we were first starting to record together, even before we started the Cannon podcast, and I had been a big fan about saying I think the league is moving to more traditional 4-4-2s. I think at the beginning, when I had made that statement, it was more of a case of me feeling like the impetus on being an accordion in a team, being able to stretch and become compact, that speed you needing to do that's going to become more and more important. We finally got data that I think backs up that claim, that we're moving towards much more of a counter-attacking league. We're moving more towards teams employing double striking partnerships, and we're looking towards more overlapping fullbacks that do resemble a 4-4-2. I truly believe, if anything, I don't love history, but people that don't know their history are doomed to fail the future. And we just tend to repeat ourselves, really, in terms of cycles and the footballing cycle. And I look at it, and I'm really looking at a lot of reminiscing of the 90s and early 2000s football that I'm seeing right now in terms of the idea about what people want to employ. There are some modern tweaks, absolutely, don't get me wrong, but these more traditional 4-4-2s, the more Milan diamond that I keep propping up from an Arsenal perspective and looking at the 3-4-3, the 4-2-4, I'm seeing a lot of these things from the past, and I'm looking at it where I don't know if next year we'll see a change tactically. I think we'll see a consolidation of a lot of my theory from where the league was going, but I do think in a couple of years down the road, what happened after the 2000s? What killed the 2000s? It was the back threes. And I think it's going to come from a point of these little teams responding. Right now, teams have gotten so brilliant from a positional sense, and they have been so well coached. It has forced teams to go quick and early to create the 1v1s. That's why we've moved to the 4-4-2, I think, personally. Now, you've done that. Teams are going to react. The little minnows are going to react, and make no mistake about it, I think people downplayed the outside the top 6 games far too much because they dictate football trends. Those are the majority of your games. So maximizing strategies against those teams and making sure you're maximizing points is what wins you titles, what wins you honors. And that, I think, is what dictates and drives a football cycle. And these guys will respond to the 4-4-2. If the Peps, the Slots, and even Arsenal, I mean, Rodrigo and Sesko is very much a striking duo partnership, mate. It is the epitome of your 4-4-2. Add a lot of the stuff that we already do out of possession in 4-4-2. Like, every single manager, mate, is moving towards it. I mean, Slot has got Frimpong. Kerkez is the one that's linked. Florian Wirtz, by the way, a brilliant player, brilliant pocket player, but this is a transition forward. Like, this is a guy that's poppy on the inside just as much. Arsenal are responding with Rodrigo. City had already got Marmoush. They're now adding Aït-Nouri to it. They want to add Livramento. They want to change to this 4-4-2 thing. Why? Because teams have packed the center. They have said, you cannot pass through here. We all know positional football now. Do something with it. All the big teams are now responding and saying, okay, our response is to add more running power out wide, draw you out so we can make the space in the center again. Teams are going to struggle with that. And it's going to be a revolving cycle, in my opinion, where they're going to say, oh crap, we're going to go from really solid in the center to going out wide now to meet the threat, which is there. That's going to force, we need another person. We still need to meet the threat outside, so we need somebody on the inside so that we're not stretched. What does that mean? 3-5-2, back three with wing backs. You've got somebody to meet them out wide. You've added a little bit more solidity in the middle of the park. Boom. Now you've got these minnows that will adopt that. And the big teams will have to respond. It'll be a constant tennis match. And that's kind of my feeling on the future of football, but I have nothing to prove it until it potentially happens or doesn't.
Yeah, no, but I think it's well broken down. And I think for me, it comes back to two things really to add to that, which is you look at the trends of the league. And as there was an Athletic article recently, which we've referenced about the I think more fast break shots and more fast break goals have been scored in the Premier League than ever, and it's now more than any other league. You look at the intensity of the Premier League in terms of repeat sprints, etc., etc. I think it comes back to really, okay, how do we as teams compete? One in that competition, but secondly, how do we innovate? And I'm looking at, if we're talking about the sort of the big six, and we're saying, well, what is the big six these days? And I'm looking through the sort of upper mid table: Newcastle United, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, Brighton, Bournemouth, Brentford, Fulham, Palace. That to me is a load of running, big space, leggy threats in there. And I'm looking at the Morgan Gibbs Whites and the how Bournemouth press you and how Brentford run at you, and Alex Iwobi and Smith Rowe, and you go through Morgan Rogers and whatever you want to go through the teams. There's a lot of runners centrally, and I think it's really okay. We need to add to compete with that, which is why I'm so keen on us getting some legs this summer in the center of the park. But also, how do we innovate against that? And I think that what the big teams are doing is what you were alluding to in terms of going wide. It's always those two questions for me. It's how do we keep up, but also how do we innovate? I guess for Arsenal, in terms of, I think, to answer those two questions for us, how do we keep up? Well, as we say, I think we both spoken about getting some more legs in the middle for sure, to close those gaps. But also out wide, yeah, I'm curious, especially with the signing of Rodrigo. I mean, we're also looking at a right-sided defender as well, and what that sort of profile looks like. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a runner, more of a Ben White type who can help us do that. And it's funny though, because Mikel has been so keen on creating those overloads inside, etc., but as much as progressing through the wide areas, I don't know. I currently can't see it. But equally, if he's watching a league trending the way it is, he must be thinking in the market, okay, how do I respond to that? And Pep and Slot have seen something, so that's what I think it is. But we'll see, and it's really interesting. And I do think the Rodrigo thing will dictate a lot of it. Yeah, go on. You got something else? No, yeah, and I'll be honest, it kind of leads into the next question because it's all about making these things fit. And like the Rodrigo, what excited me. I think people are annoyed at this statement at this point, but I love the Rodrigo signing for what it could mean as far as changing our attack and platforming different areas. And I mean, we've got so many questions that are about that, but one from Nash at Nash_AFC in general. Alex, what do you think we set up with? Let's project in terms of, it sounds like Sesko, Zubimendi, and Rodrigo seem to be hopefully the three signings that we're going to be bringing in. Do you feel that Mikel can change? He says to make the necessary changes soon enough, but I will blow this up because I've got this so many times on X where people, they like Rodrigo or they like a player, but they ignore them completely from their frame of mind because it's not what I saw with Arsenal this season. And Mikel is so rigid. He doesn't like changing. There are these insistence on roles. Do you believe the rigidity
to which a lot of people ask, like there's so many questions that say, will we buy the overlapping left back? He'll never do it. Do we buy this player? That's not a Mikel player. He'll never do it. And I just want to blow it up because I look at this transfer window. Personally, I see a complete dichotomy to what he has been used to in a lot of different ways. Zubimendi, Rodrigo imply huge changes to our footballing system that are not normal. If you were just telling me, George, why don't you just get a touchline winger instead of getting an overlapping left back with Rodrigo? Guys, that's what the coach is doing. So like he clearly is open to multiple different systems. And I don't think it's as rigid as what people think. However, there is a part of our fan base that do feel Mikel is that rigid, that do feel that we need to remove consideration of other options, other systems, other ways of playing, unless it is what you see on the football pitch. Where do you stand? Is that a football manager consequence? Is that what fans always are? Or is it more even with Mikel that he as a coach dictates that a little bit just because of the way that he carries himself? Like, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think that last point is a good one actually in terms of the way he carries himself because he is quite sort of stoic, I guess, in the way he sort of handles the media and those sorts of things. So maybe that leads to a sense of lack of change or something. Look, there's two things. There's historical context and there's what's happening right now. Every season, basically, apart as Rohan has detailed many times on this podcast, every single season, we have changed something. Something has shifted. So the idea that in 23-24, the further that gets in the rearview mirror, the more I think about Mikel's comments last season. I think if you were to get Mikel with that, what's it called in Harry Potter, the Veritas Serum, you can't lie, the stuff that you give him, and he said, what would you have wanted last summer? And he can't lie. I don't know this, of course, I'm just predicting, but I can't imagine it was a Marino Calafiori summer. I'm sorry, I don't think that was what he wanted, fundamentally. We were looking at Šeško, we were looking at other forwards. I think something was due to change. So I fundamentally believe, especially with the who we've been linked to so far, that things are about to change. Also with who we're signing. Look, guys, in my opinion, if we wanted to supplement or get better at what we currently do in our system, we would be, in my opinion, in for the likes of Ekitike. We would be in for Nico Williams. We would be in for maybe, we probably would be in for Nagume or something like that. We'd be looking at basically upgrades to players that we already have. Nico Williams, if you give him Martinelli's role today, in my opinion, probably it will take him a little bit of time, but probably ends up getting more change out of that, essentially. If you give Ekitike Havertz's role, he could do that, maybe take some strain off him. Rodrigo and Šeško, as George was kind of alluding to, in my opinion, that indicates a very different way of wanting to play. That is in the context, and I think we've got to be cautious as well, because we're seeing Aït-Nouri sign, Kirkes signing, and whoever, Frimpong signing, whatever, and we're going, well, we've got to keep up. Well, hang on a minute. Again, we're back to that thing of keeping up, yes, keeping up with the legs, but also innovating our own way.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, when you can, as Arsenal, if you can sign one of the most freak athlete talents I've ever seen in Benjamin Šeško, and you can sign one of the most gifted technicians on the planet, you're doing something slightly differently, in my opinion, with what's going on. So I'm really excited, to be honest. And I maybe this is where you're going. I do reject any question that Mikel doesn't change. It's just, if you look over the course of his Arsenal career, it's just not true. It's simply untrue. So maybe we haven't seen enough recently, but to me, that comes a lot back to the board, and rather than Mikel not wanting to do anything.
Do you know what it is specifically for me? And I'm going to be very specific with this critique, because I think this is where people are missing like the forest from the trees. Mikel is not a rigid tactical manager. In fact, if you want to blow it up and take out the emotion from it, like we've said so many times on this podcast, every year has seen a major tactical evolution, and it wasn't small. Like, in order to win the FA Cup, compared to what we did with Jesus and Zinchenko versus what we did to try to get competing the following year, those aren't small changes. They're pretty drastic changes as far as an evolution goes. However, I do believe that when Mikel has an idea of a season, a theme, that he does, he is quite rigid to that theme of the season. That, I think, is potentially fair. And what is potentially fair for me is when he doesn't have plan A solutions to that theme with your main player, he does struggle to replicate that theme in other areas with other players. I look back to like the Villarreal time when we looked at the Emile Smith Rowe at false nine. everyone was quite confused at the tactic for that, but then went to put Bukayo Saka left back in following league games after people were calling for it. Like, that was the best way to replace what we had lost on the overlap, but he didn't do it, and he did it late. And that for me is like, you know, a coach will always do confusing things. They're human, guys. Like, you know, I don't pretend to know more than the coach or people in charge, but also I do feel that they make mistakes sometimes. But Mikel's, for me, has been an insistence where if there's a theme and a plan A has gone, he hasn't shown me enough ways of replicating that theme in other players in other areas. That's where I agree with. But as far as the rigidity to like being open to different ideas and different themes for a season, I categorically reject it.
Yeah. I think it's that thing again. I think I said this on a recent podcast, because we're analysing the team game to game to game to game to game. You can pick up things that happen game to game that are mistakes, that are problems, but you can't step out and go, hang on a minute, but over the course of 5 years, this is changing. So I do buy that. I think in-season solutions is maybe something for Mikel to look at, maybe when we come to sort of what we're expecting of 25-26, maybe some more in-season solutions, but I think between seasons, something is definitely going to change. Just blowing this out slightly, so we had a question on the Discord from Roger, which was favourite Wirtz slander name. I just want to maybe pick up on some more general rather than less sort of tactical things going on around the Premier League. Ange is gone.
Your favorite
George, what's
person.
my role on the podcast now? I'm just impressions and listening to you, according to certain people on X. So what do I do? It's my favorite person.
Actually, how did you feel about it? Like when you heard it, like was it something that you were expecting?
Gutted. I'll tell you what. Firstly, no, genuinely gutted because I like a character, as people know. I like a character in the Premier League. I'm gutted because he's not a good manager. Put it that way. And I'm gutted more that they're getting Thomas Frank. I think Thomas Frank will. I don't believe that Thomas Frank will win title after title after title at Tottenham, but he will make them extremely hard to beat. He'll work within his remit, and he'll get a lot out of that team. That it's going to be very, very tough to beat them with a bit more resource. I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to cap him. Also, as you know, I've said many times, if Mikel were ever to leave, Thomas Frank is someone I would absolutely look at just from a person, just the values. So how am I going to hate Thomas Frank now? I'm gutted.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ange gone.
No, that hurt. I'll be honest. The Thomas Frank, that was one of the smartest things. Like, first off, it took a lot of balls from a Daniel Levy situation. Like, we're talking about the change room. Like, it's hilarious, the whole character about what he is and, you know, what Ange was able to do this season. And, you know, he is a strong character. Typical Greek. I'll be honest with you. Anybody that knows the Greeks, they're not afraid to, like, talk their opinion, you know, and he's just not PR trained, Ange, fundamentally. He really isn't. Or he sometimes leans into it a little bit too far. But
I have a different take, but yeah, fine. So we'll agree on not PR trade. I'll buy that, yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. He is a very, very eccentric character. And so from that perspective, we've lost something, like in the story of the Premier League. But it was huge for Daniel Levy to do what he did. And you know, from a player perspective, this is a guy that just won them their first trophy in how long? And, you know, the players they are trophy led. Like I do buy the stories that there was a player revolt afterwards, because it's true. Like he won a major trophy, and like they clearly were still fighting for him and behind him. Now to get Thomas Frank, that is huge bait. I actually even have a little bit of a different tank on Thomas Frank. I think he can win titles easily. And the only reason he hasn't is he has been battling against resources and a club for so long. Like, that guy has squeezed the cloth so much. There's no water left in your sponge in terms of what he's been able to do with Brentford and where he's been able to take them. And I think the biggest mistake that Manchester United ever did, in the short term at the very least, is not listen to Dan Ashworth, in which Thomas Frank was something that he was pushing. With their resources, with the backing of a big club money like that, huge. I don't know if Spurs in the long term can necessarily, you know, match any kind of financial expenditure. I mean, they're surely trying with the whole stadium and everything, and they are trying to put themselves at a big boy table. However, fundamentally, I mean this with all due respect, it's Spurs, and there is there is a cap to what that means in the world. Now, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea even. But I think those three carry a very big context in the Premier League and England, right? So for him to miss out on United, I'm sad on the character. Like, I would have hated him at United, but dear God, he would have made them very, very competitive. I do think that Thomas Frank does better than pretty much any Tottenham manager that we've seen, including Poch. I think he gets them to the point where we're going to start to fear them. He's going to get them respected. Again, I don't think it'll happen next season.
Yeah,
but I do think he's that quality of a coach. He's going to get them respected.
No, I hear that. I will say I think consistently requires a structural, like consistent titles requires a structural alignment, which I think is always my big question at Spurs, and being able to be in a position where, for example, you're Man City and you've tracked that Haaland, picture for 3 years, whatever it is, and you've tracked that Jude picture, whatever it might be. That's the question. He might have been able to do that at Man United if they sort themselves out. I don't think under this Tottenham ownership he will. But yeah, I also, mate, just as a person, I really like him, and I hate that we're going to have to go against him. Just sort of sticking on the wider league for a second as well. Maybe one other story. Obviously, Chelsea signing Delap and Newcastle after various. Chelsea signed Delap and Gittins, and Newcastle after various players and so on and so forth. Wirtz going to Liverpool. Okay, hot take.
Uh-oh.
I think Florian Wirtz is a fantastic football player. Let's be absolutely clear. 118 million euros.
Yeah.
Whew. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say overpay. Right? I don't know, but for that, for the level I've seen from him, that is you're buying one of the best players in the world. Price, okay. Let me see, because I haven't yet seen it. Brilliant player though.
I love Florian Wirtz. He is in that talent pool for me where I think if you platform him, he can perform to be one of the best players in the world. I'll be honest though,
but
mate.
Interesting caveat though, isn't it? Because it's like if you play to his 100%. Strengths, and that's always the big question.
100%, and that's why I was going to go into it. Like 113 million pounds, mate. I'm sorry, that means
18.
Yeah,
latest.
It got rejected, did it not? The 113, like the recent bid, or
could be euros? Let me look it up. You go for it. I'll look up.
Yeah. Regardless, when you get to the 105 million pound mark and above, and you start dealing with those kind of players, mate, you have to do more than just be the best player in the world. To be honest with you, as far as the position, you have to change the club. Like to do that, mate. Like you're talking about the Mbappes, you're talking about the Coutinhos, you're talking like these are transfer values that you can't do. They screw you up for other transfers. Like to go all in means he is going to lead a revolution and an era. He's going to define an era. By the way, I put that pressure on Declan Rice. I'm consistent. Yeah. But I believe in the talent that it is not just the best player in the world. I think he is somebody that's going to redefine the position in that role. I think he is somebody that's going to define a Premier League great. I'm good enough placing my faith in a talent like that to pay for that kind of money. And I'll keep it 100. If Arsenal ever do a transfer at the Declan Rice or more again, that's the level I demand. You can't just be the best player in the world. You can't just have had a brilliant season. You have to go beyond. Like your Henrys, your Bergkamps, those are your 150 million pound players. They weren't just the top goal scorers in the league. They represented something. They were themselves an enigma. I don't know if I feel that way about Florian Wirtz. I maintain he's kind of in that camp of world-class, in fact, output to a system, to a particular type of way. And by the way, I'll be really consistent. I do put Rodrigo in that. I don't think Rodrigo is somebody that I think changes the league, changes the position, defines eras. If you platform him, he can perform to a world-class level. But I do feel you can't go beyond 89 million pounds for me. Like the upper limits of those things are kind of like world-class to a system, 89 million pounds.
Yeah.
Undoubted world-class that define eras, 100 million plus. If you're talking about a very good player that's, probably top 3 to 5 in their position, that's going to operate for a very long time, 60 to 75 million pounds is kind of my mark. And then anything under 60 is not marquee. That should be considered the moderate depth, should be considered decent, or so raw, I don't know what you are, but I can't demand anything. You know, those are the levels that I put expenditure on in the transfer window. But yeah, I think Florian Wirtz could prove people wrong in certain aspects. But that's a big deal, mate. And I think what's the wage? Isn't it something like 350 or 380K a week?
350,000 pounds. I mean, again, depends who you believe. TalkSport saying they're holding out for 126 million pounds. Look, who knows? I don't know. Like, ultimately, value comes to if you have a need and you feel like someone can fill it. Ultimately, someone's worth 20 million to you and someone's worth 50 million to him.
You're willing to pay for it.
It's exactly. So it's there, but just as a talent level for that kind of money, I think you categorize it well. Like that's Saka for me. That's can perform wherever you put him, in any game state, at any time, on any day, in any system, on any team, will perform for you. And I don't see that at the moment, but we'll see. We'll see ultimately, and that's players are there to kind of prove you wrong a little bit. We'll come back to questions in a second. Just want to make sure we cover certain things. So David Ornstein, Athletic, everyone basically, Fabrizio Romano, and so on and so forth. Reports suggest the bomba. I won't say that. The reports yesterday that Arsenal are close to finalising the Kepa Arrizabalaga deal. The Athletic reported on June the 6th that Arsenal made Arrizabalaga their top target as they looked to recruit a deputy to first choice goalkeeper David Raya. Obviously, we looked at Joe Garcia, but Barcelona are signing him. It's a £5 million release clause. You're going to have to explain the wage thing to me because I think I'm still confused about it. But yeah, overall thoughts on that. As a package, as an idea, I think ultimately windows come back to this. If Mbappe becomes available, and you were planning on spending £40 million on another goalkeeper, you don't do it. Do you know what I mean? And so if Rodrigo is becoming available, or another player becomes available, or things change or whatever, making a backup goalkeeper signing, very low wage, very low risk, very easy, experience, is willing to come in and play number two. Let's not forget this was the most expensive goalkeeper this is the most expensive goalkeeper in history. So that's no guarantee of quality, but that's the guarantee of what the regard he was held in at one point. And that talent doesn't just vanish. Again, it's all about environment. So I think this is secretly, and if you can explain the wage situation to me one more time, and please be patient with me, this is secretly one of a brilliant deal, like a really brilliant deal.
Yeah. I'll do the wage thing because it's like more of a technical thing. So I think that there isn't a guarantee about what contract was signed. There is a lot of conflicting reports about whether or not it was an entirely new contract, whether it was Chelsea subsidizing. But Kepa at Chelsea was earning 150k a week, and that was like his contract. Then in order to go to Bournemouth, there is conflicting reports about whether or not he signed a completely different contract or whether or not Chelsea agreed to subsidize the 50%. But he moved to Bournemouth so that Bournemouth could put him under their wage structure for 75k a week. I'm not sure if he signed a completely new deal in that time or whether or not, because it's conflicting. I mean, David Ornstein says it is on significantly reduced terms. Then other people are saying that it was subsidized 50% by Chelsea, but he was put on 75k at Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Now,
so just to lay this out, sorry, to the situations that I think there's a bit of, so because he could have been on, and I saw someone say he was on 195,000, then reduced it down, so then that could be split between two £75,000 a week payments from Bournemouth and Chelsea, i.e. had he stayed at Chelsea for the final year of his contract, he's still on £150,000. But also some people are saying he's halved his fees and therefore he's on 75k. So it's a little bit complicated. But to be honest, as a total financial package, say he could be on 200k a week for £5 million. I think it's not bad.
No, it objectively, like at £5 million is a phenomenal value deal, isn't it? Like, but I will say, like, a lot of this does depend kind of on the total strategy. Like if this goes into the forwards, this is where I think a lot of people will change even more so. Like it's already a brilliant deal in isolation, in my opinion. But beyond that, it starts to become a freaking brilliant deal if it starts landing you the targets that you felt like you needed. Now, the only thing for me that makes me think that he is on 75k is we pay David Raya £100,000 a week right now. Like, of course, various sources, maybe it's 120, but the range of David Raya is £100,000. I do not believe that we're paying a second goalkeeper more than our first goalkeeper. So I think categorically he is in under 100k category, or anywhere from 80 to 100. Like, you're not paying more than the first choice goalkeeper. So in that sense, it's brilliant. And yeah, like mate, it is a deal that allows you to do other things. It's flexibility. The whole strategy of, do you release the Garcia payment as a release clause, which by the way it would be because there's so many competitions there, means it's huge. Like, it's not just a money thing. People go, what's the difference between 5 and 21? Well, guys, no, it isn't, because how transfers work is there's a lot of amortization. And so if you buy an 85 million pound player, you may only spend 20 million pounds, by the way, of that 85, 89 million pounds in your first year. Guys, that's the value of the Juan Garcia release clause. Like, that's the impact. It is genuinely the difference in being able to afford, on an accounting sense, an 85 million pound player. So that flexibility is undoubted. Now, the thing is, you have to then follow through in terms of buying the extra bit at forward. And I maybe we can debate, like, if you believe Rodrigo and Sesko is going above and beyond, or if that's the minimum of what we needed or expected. But I think the idea is, by doing 5, you open yourself up to do more. Maybe you guarantee an overlapping left back. Maybe you guarantee flexibility in payments. Maybe we guarantee that Rodrigo and Sesko are in the next 2 weeks. Like, the speed to which you can do a deal, because you haven't spent so much cash flow in releasing a release clause, means that you can speed up these huge deals as well. Like, there are so many knock-on effects that the context could look a lot better. But for me, this is just such a brilliant deal in so many different ways. It's £5 million, huge experience in the Champions League and the Premier League. I don't doubt that this is a player that could start for 10 games in a row and I'd be upset. I don't want him my starting goalkeeper forever. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's that level, but he's definitely more than 3/4 of the backups that you're going to find in world football. And this is a guy that was a top 5 goalkeeper in the league last season, who played in a Bournemouth side that had one of the highest lines in the league from a pressing perspective. Like, he completely fits the philosophy. He's able to walk in and do a lot of the things that we ask our goalkeepers to do. And mate, he just factually was a top 5 goalkeeper in the league last year. Like, this isn't a crap player.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think also really what I'm trying to do is put us in the same category as... I've always looked at City's goalkeeping group and how they kept that together with Ederson and Ortega, and felt quite jealous. And I think this puts us on that level for me, arguably higher. Liverpool have just lost Kelleher, so it depends what they do with Mamadashvili. I think he's coming in. He might stay. I can't imagine a player of that quality is going to stay and sit on the bench for too long behind Alisson. So yeah, and I think the fact that we've done it for such a good price, I think is amazing. If just to round off on the wages thing, the reason I'm sticking on it is, if it's £5 million and £75,000 a week for Kepa, knight Andrea Berta already, because that is an unbelievable deal. I'm glad we covered it. We'll try and get scouted out on it properly. We're looking to see if we can get a goalie expert on, so we can, because I remember I did this thing on Ramsdale with John Harrison. I remember watching it back and being like, I don't know anything about goalkeepers. Anything. We did have some news on, I think was it Friday? No, Thursday, from Fabrizio Romano about, you're going to have to help me out with the pronunciation, which is hilarious. I know, exactly. Tognozzi? Former Juventus head of scouting and Granada director Matteo Tognozzi is currently in advanced talks to sign at Arsenal. He'll be a part of the team working under Andrea Berta. Realistically, George, all I know about him is he was at Juventus, and obviously he's looked at Sula, Nelling Jr., Huijsen is probably the big question. Thoughts on this, and thoughts on the sort of the supplementation of Berta's team.
I think it's a pretty big move, mate. Like he's arguably one of, if not the best talent scout in the world in terms of the regard of it. And in terms of trying to understand what Arsenal have really done poorly in the last 5 years, from an academy sense and from a talent recruitment sense, we haven't been able to turn around top talents that have been able to be sold for major money. And, I think a lot of the issues is people look at, I was sending a list of some of the players that he was able to recruit for Juventus, which was crazy. It was like Barranquilla, Yildiz, Huijsen, there was Ravella. There was so many players that they then sold, and people are like, well, how does it matter? I mean, he identified the talents. It's not on him to then sell them. If the sporting directors are trying to do these dumb moves, like that's not on him and his decision to sell. He's the one that has consistently provided that pipeline, and that'll be a huge thing, which I actually think gets or doesn't get spoken about enough as far as what Arsenal have done this season. And I don't know if people know, but we will do an academy review. But Arsenal just released a crazy amount of academy youth players. In fact, people are actually even wondering how we're going to put out a U21 team, in the sense that they're going to platform a lot of the U16s and the U18s. There's a huge amount of room in the starting 11 that has been cleared this season. And I'm excited, mate. I'm excited for him to walk in and being able to provide us with some revenue from buying really good prospects that we feel give a good chance. Either they make a really big splash in the first team, which, by the way, the list that you're talking about with Dean, Yildiz, and so on, those are huge players that ended up for the first team. But there was a lot of other players like your Ravellas and your Ricci's and other people like those that are good players, but then were moved on for cash and generated massive amounts of revenue for the club. That is something that we struggle with. So that's really huge. And I don't know, mate, like there is something to be said about the whole replacing Ato thing. And I mean, Berta is getting a soldier in the background staff and making an early move. I think it's a brilliant move, but it's no doubt, I want to be fair, he is positioning his power a bit. I mean, you've got Mikel, who has absolutely stayed there for quite a while, but from my reading, this isn't just a talent ID role. He is going to be given a little bit of a bigger role. And by the way, that makes sense. Juventus were trying to make him their sporting director, by the way. He's not coming just to be a talent scout. He's going to have a little bit of the Jason Ato role. And that involved a little bit more than just ID and looking at young gems and whatnot. It was more than that. So I think it's interesting. I'm interested to see what that does in a power dynamic sense, because I do think that we're adding more football people to a decision-making process. And that can always be a good thing for me.
Yeah, it's more football intelligence, and if we think it can add, because I've long looked at the City group and how they handle things with talent, and you look at a lot of how they're supplementing the first team is, we may sniff at 3 million here or 6 million here or whatever. Hang on a minute, that's a lot of money just because it's not, a massive signing or whatever, or a massive sale. That's still a massive part of, and could pay a lot of people's wages and keep academies going, etc., etc. And I think I've always felt, Rohan and I sort of spoke about it on TCP Live, probably apart from like Nuno and Martinelli, I can't think of, under this current regime, us taking a risk like that in the way City do with, like they signed this Juma Bar guy. I'm just looking through that Echeverri guy at River Plate. There's Tedic, this guy went to Charlton. There's, we could sort of go through in the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've got like 6, 7, 8, 9 talents who you look at and you go, okay, I can, you may not work out, and that's fine, but you're going to be sold for a profit. You're going to, supplement the first team in a certain way. And also, you never know. You just never know who you're going to stumble upon. In the same way we found Martinelli, right? And when you do that, the upside you do, it's not, we sort of play with these numbers. We play with, he'll go for 60 million on 70. 60 million pounds just for a business. Just think about, just hold it for a second. Forget the player, forget football. If you could get a 60 million pound upside on a talent that you pick out, this is unbelievable level. So if and he's got a great track record. So yeah, it's exciting. I think let's see how it sort of fits in. According to Hand of Arsenal, he's coming in as a sort of sub-director, was basically what the latest thing was. Understanding is Matteo Tonuzzi will join us on a sub-director role, responsible in identifying talent such as Yildiz, Sula and Huijsen for their next-gen programme. An excellent coup for Arsenal to reshape their future. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Let's go back to the questions.
You can get me an ice cream?
Oh, can you hear it? Should we get one? What would you get if you were getting an ice cream? I'd get a little Mr. Whippy.
Oh, I am so boring. I just like my vanilla ice cream in a cone.
You shock me. You shock me. Let's do this because this probably comes to some stuff we haven't necessarily covered from Forder, which holds the biggest importance this summer: contract renewals for Gabriel, Saka, etc., or signing new players. Now, really pleased with the Gabriel news. We can maybe reflect on that a little bit. I just it's massive, but I think it's an interesting question because, like, obviously naturally we're interested in the signings, but I made this point in a TDK video recently. If I said to someone who wasn't involved in football, what do you think is more important? Getting the best player in their position in the world to sign a contract at your club, or getting someone who might be the next best player in the world to sign a contract at your club? Obviously the first one, right? That's what we're doing. So Gabriel, whether you agree with that with Gabriel or Saka or Saliba, whatever it might be, I don't want us to I think sometimes contracts are seen as kind of formalities. It shouldn't be seen as a formality. He can go anywhere in the world, and he's chosen to stay with Arsenal. And yeah, it's a not a coup, but it's a fantastic bit of business. Really.
I'll say it's a coup. I think, from my perspective, what the coup is being able to retain talent like this. From an Arsenal fan, you can't talk about that if you've grown up losing your best talents. And that's the reason we didn't win the league. It wasn't a case of just not replace. Like, we replaced really well, but it was because we kept getting our knees cut out from under us, where every year a major talent was gone. I do think it's a coup. And I agree with you. I think a lot of people do feel that it's a formality. And I look at it. What is Gabriel? He's the best left center back in the world, period. What's Saliba? Arguably, you want to talk about Van Dijk, sure, but best right center back in the world. Best center back partnership in the world. That means something. Saka, one of the best right wingers in the world. Signing him up just because he's Hale End, he doesn't owe us anything. Those are huge moves. And doing it has a ripple on effect, mate. Like it means like your Miles, your Ethan getting signed up, getting your team to buy in and to really feel that this is the place for their development is huge. And these contracts are big. Like Gabriel's a little bit later. This is his final contract. So I think it's huge, right? But Saliba and Saka are pretty big. Those are your pre-prime contracts. The next contract is the one. It's the last chance that they're going to be able to really get crazy money. I'm sure they'll get another contract cycle in the 30s, but that's typically always a debate. Can you match? Can you do something a little bit on the superstar wages? But for me, signing now means that the best young talents in world football, which we have a couple in Saliba and Saka, trust Arsenal to be the destination to get them to their prime. That to me says quite a bit in its own right. And I do think that the Gabriel signing is absolutely massive. It sets the tone, actually, for a lot of those. I don't know if you know the value of the wage, and I don't know if that's been really communicated. But to me, I think that was the first benchmark in the summer of renewals, where sealing Gabriel means Saliba has a benchmark to look to. Saka has a benchmark to look to. And we hear that those are close, but I do think that being the first domino to fly means that others will subsequently come. And I did make a point. I don't know how you feel. I think you may feel that it's a little early, but have a look at some of the major moves that Arsenal have done in the first week, of the transfer window right now. Tognosi is a really big appointment. It's not just a head scout. It is absolutely somebody that's going to help Berta with his duties as a sporting director. Like, that's a big move. Secured a big background staff. One of your pillars to start a majority. Now, I'm only talking certainties, but Miles, Ethan, Saka, Saliba, all looking to sign, by the way. But you've signed your huge left center back that you needed, by the way. Him going would have changed quite a bit, as regardless of what people say. Then the Zubimendi deal. I've had fights, as I always do, on Twitter, but people somehow think that was a given. I don't buy that with Alonso having gone to Madrid now. I don't buy that. And I certainly feel that Madrid have asked him a question. Just because you agree a deal back in January doesn't mean that they're obligated then to go and carry through with you. So there had to be stuff that Berta had to do specifically from February onward to say, no, you're still in my plans, you're still my number one, and you're still a really valuable signing. Reject Madrid. Those conversations had to happen. Doing that, and then of course the Kepa deal, which I think implies a lot of having a nose for a deal. Because regardless of whether or not it was a new contract or not, Chelsea did have an opportunity because they had another year. You could have looked at that in terms of them increasing the wage, making it more difficult, or even just finding out that Kepa, had that £5 million release clause and saying, okay, now's the time to move for it. The strategy about choosing between £5 million Kepa and 22 million release clause Juan Garcia, it's not a strategy that I feel that we've always nailed in recent seasons. So these are just the start of a couple big moves, but I see a huge amount of efficiency, maturity in operations, and finally looking a little bit like killers, because you also have to add Sesko and Rodrigo negotiations. They're not slow, mate. Like things have popped off in the last week as far as some of the advancement with what we've heard. I don't want to go into the what ifs, but factually things have advanced with Sesko. It's no longer a debate whether or not we're in talks for him and Isaac Gyökeres. We're in talks for Sesko. Gyökeres, we've got to a point where if we bid, I'm sure he signs. Rodrigo, we're talking to. Nico Williams, we've had major links with huge talks. There's just a level of, in my opinion, expertise in how we've handled our approach where I don't feel worried. I feel that there are 3 or 4 signings that I can just press play on and bid on, and we could look like getting. I didn't feel that way at the start of the summer last year, even with Calafiori and Marino. I had a lot of hopes. I never had that feeling.
Yeah, I think Bertie deserves a lot of credit, and I'm going to say something, and I know we want to downplay it. I think we just need to be cautious. It is still early, and I think things like, for example, the Gabriel contract, I know for a fact that was being discussed, last November, and that's been going on through the season. This isn't the first time we've ever spoken to Šeško. This isn't the first time we've spoken to Zubimendi. However, he's come in and the deals have advanced very quickly. I think the one thing I'll credit Berta with is the speed of things, at least from an outside perspective, and the decisiveness. Whether things work out, whether things don't, whether things were happening before, weren't happening before, whatever. That's a different question, and maybe that's when I'll come to judge him sort of from a quality perspective. But what I really like is the speed and the directness and the purpose in what he's doing. And yeah, Arsenal, I think, before we've looked at the sort of the speed of things. I'm looking back at 2020, right? Thomas Partey on deadline day, release clause.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that done? If it was a release clause, why wasn't it done sooner? Like when you do a release clause on deadline day, when you do Raheem Sterling on deadline day, things like that, like those just objectively can happen sooner. And so that's the thing I'm impressed with. As I say, I think it's difficult to, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him because he will have been involved in the Gabriel conversations, of course, but it's difficult to judge. And I want to look at it more at the end of summer, but it is really exciting. And I think what I think Berta represents to me is someone who comes in with no, as we sort of said at the time, someone who comes in with no kind of preconceptions of what this team should be. And as I've said before, I feel like we've been in this kind of project mode, and I'm sure there'll be conversations a lot about, value and contracts and stuff, etc., as they should do in the Jason Ato Edu conversations.
Yeah,
Berta comes in and says, okay, this is what we're doing. Like, and I think we maybe needed that. Maybe it was the right time for it to happen. So yeah, really pleased. Let's finish with a couple more questions. Why don't you go back to you on the old Cristiano Ronaldo, please, George?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So probably, I don't know if it's like a super tactical question, this one, actually. Okay. Has Arteta, from Rocco at Joe620-60833, has Arteta or anyone else suggested that they will do better rotating players this season? Would it be wise to buy players with rotation in mind, not necessarily stardom? Also, I don't know why star signings can't be convinced that rotation will benefit them and the team long term. A lot of questions in there, but maybe just to try to consolidate it a little bit for you, in the sense of, where do you stand on the whole superstardom rotation aspect? And do you believe that in the future, squads and teams, we've had talks about pillars on this podcast before, but how set are you towards buying rotation and convincing players of rotation, and whether or not rotation could be protective even from, a superstar's career perspective?
Yeah, I look at, there's a question on the Discord as well from Tipsy, sort of similar sort of vein. I think for me, I always try and we can get so caught up in just the Arsenal sphere, and you get in there and forget that ultimately everything that Arsenal do is in comparison to other clubs.
Yeah,
we could get 3 points. If no one else got any points, we'd win the league. It's like so it depends. It depends what they do, right? And I look at Man City and I look at a squad of, let's just do centre backs: Ruben Diaz, John Stones, Nathan Ake. I suppose Rodri could play there if you wanted him to. Vitor Reis, Josko Gvardiol, Manuel Akanji, Kuzanov. You could probably play other players there as well. Even just in that position, that's what we're competing with. For me, I said this in January when everything was falling over. I want to be having conversations. I want to have the conversation, how is he going to get minutes? Because I'm telling you, in this modern era, with the intensity of the game, with the amount of games, with the competitions, I want to be involved in the Club World Cup. Like, sorry, I do. Like, if that's a place that we're going to be playing against the best teams in the world in the best competitions, and if you're going to get a nice little badge if you win it and all those sorts of stuff, I want to be in the Club World Cup. So how do we do that? I do think there is a little bit of an aversion at Arsenal of a kind of, well, how is he going to get minutes? I'll tell you how he's going to get minutes if he's the best player. If he's the best player, he'll play. So don't worry about it. Like, honestly, please don't worry about it. We could sign 5 more right wingers. Saka will play if he's the best player. So for me, it's not something that, and it goes back to this, I keep mentioning it, but it goes back to this project mindset, and it goes back to this slightly where do we want to be mindset that I think we have. And we spend because of the connections to the club, and I get it, we care about the players a lot, and we go, we don't want to make them unhappy, or it doesn't matter. Sorry, like if we're trying to win the biggest prizes, well, it matters to a degree. I'm being slightly facetious, but in terms of who's going to get more minutes, Šeško and Havertz, is he going to? I'll tell you what's going to happen. If Šeško comes in and absolutely bangs, and Kai Havertz can't get in the team, that tells you about what's going on, and then Kai Havertz will have to move on. Like that's the position I want to be in as a club, because I'll tell you why. That's where Man City are. That's where Real Madrid are. That's where Bayern Munich are, and we need to shift that mindset a bit.
100%. And I don't worry about talent. Like, it's just like on the levels of
if you're good, you'll get on the pitch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But,
you'll play.
And also just like to a certain degree, like, when people are like, they talk about, well, how do we make room for Max Dowman and Ethan? And like, how about the pathway and ensuring that people get... I start to think to myself, I go, it's quality. Like, who cares? It is quality. I'm more worried about Jesus, who is on crazy wages that we can't seem to get on the pitch, that is paid a lot to impact a lot and isn't. Then I start talking about it. I will never sit there and say, got too many quality players, got to make sure that, they're happy, because, that's important. Like, no, I mean, I do think like a dressing room and cohesiveness is all important. But I've said this point on Twitter, like kind of facetiously, and I think a lot of people like ignore it a little bit. In our biggest time with the Invincibles, having Sylvian Wiltor and Kanu on the bench was stupid. It was they were objectively starting level caliber players for some serious title contending teams. That was the level that they could play at. So when you're talking about this, and you're talking about like the idea of recruiting and rotation, the one thing I will say is I just need to see whatever I put into you, I'm receiving back into the team. And if you fall below that line, I'm looking towards an upgrade, a sale, a replacement. That's how I feel about rotation. But in terms of actually playing, I do think that there's a big part of this discussion that needs to lean into, if you are going to protect players, that's very important as well. Saliba has played now consistently back-to-back seasons with over 3,000 minutes. That's not sustainable. Yep. That's not you protecting your asset. And just because you're going to rotate Saliba doesn't mean Saliba's bad and you don't want him to play. No. It means I want Saliba to play for Arsenal for another 5 years, not for the next 3.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. And I just don't even think we're close to overloading the squad with too much talent. Like, it just
we're factually less. We put
me.
22 out of the 25, and we need players.
So like, it's just not a concern for me. Also, like, some people will say, well, yeah, guys, but you tank the value or whatever. Okay, what are we doing right now?
Yeah.
Real Madrid have 3 left wingers. They have 3. Vinny Jr., well, 3.5, 2.5. Vinny Jr., Kylian Mbappe, who stands over there, and Rodrigo. We're about to spend, hopefully, £80 million to go and sign him. I get it. I do get it. But we need to get back in the position where we're winning stuff with high-quality players, and then we have the power. And then the players want to stay there because they're going to win stuff. Why is Kepa coming to Arsenal, the most expensive goalkeeper in the world, on the wages he is, supposedly, because he thinks he can win here. And if we win stuff by getting high quality play, it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing, but you've just, for me, it's a quality.
I actually think that you bring a brilliant point to that, where if you're in Rodrigo and you still get £80 million, I don't think people are realizing the effect of that. Like, okay, so are you telling me that a bad consequence is that by recruiting so much talent that you're forced to sell a major asset that you then can reinvest into your squad, that's a bad thing? Like, it's bad when the talent isn't being used or the talent is underperforming. It is not bad to buy talent and say, oh shoot, I have too much of it, I have to sell it. Madrid don't ever find a problem with doing it. By the way, tons of these big clubs don't have a bad way of doing it. And fundamentally, to me, make sure that the input that you're giving is giving back into the team. That's the most important thing. So I will never complain about having too much talent and pathways and anything like that. I even had this discussion with Sver Nightpan when it was happening in January. It was like, what are we going to do with Ethan and the pathway? I go, guys, it's talent in the squad. Is he redundant? Yes or no? Are they offering the same thing that they do as each other? If it's no, okay, great. That's check 1. Are they going to add to us winning games? Do they have the quality I would like? Yes or no? Yes, great. Are they going to give you what you put in? Yes or no? If all of those things are yes, perfect. And if you don't use them, you sell and you reinvest. We need to be a bit better about that. I think we're ingrained as Arsenal fans because we haven't been greedy like that. We don't know the spoils of, maybe this is going to sound entitled, but somebody that has come from nothing to now be at a big boy table and go to a restaurant, for example, and they're using little forks to pull out snails. And they're like, wait, what are you doing? Like, shouldn't you just use your fingers? Or you see ribs and you see these things and people are like, no, like, we can order more. It's fine. You don't need to do those things. There is a bit of that with Arsenal clutching their pearls about trying to be underdeveloped and be like, oh, we need to protect our babies and our pathway. No, we can get talent and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Vintage George analogy, but yeah. And this is like, for example, with the Saka thing, it's like, well, guys, Saka's going to play. It's okay. It's okay, guys. He's going to play. Don't worry. We might sign someone. He'll still play. We'll finish there. We'll finish with one more question because realistically, there was sort of, I would say, 50% of the questions were rewordings of the same thing. So let's do this. Kepa as your second goalkeeper. Question mark currently on the defenders. Zubamendi plus how many? Sesko Rodrigo plus 1. How are you feeling about that as a summer, and can you fill in my blanks?
I think it's objectively a brilliant summer. The plus 1 really does make or break the window, mate. I'll be real with you. I'm not insistent. Like, I think that window that you've cited of the guarantees that we know, so to speak, the Zubamendi, the Sesko, the Rodrigo, the Kepa, the 4 there make it a very good summer. Already far beyond last summer's. I don't think that's the bar. Yeah. But you're talking about already a 7.5 out of 10 from there for me. If you do nothing, 7.5. If you do okay in terms of the signing, 8. It can go to an 8.5 to me with a really top signing. I think if I was trying to get it to a 9 out of 10, I think I start adding the extensions into it, what we did with sales and whatnot. But from a recruitment standpoint, 5 phenomenal talents, I'm okay with. That to me is like a really brilliant summer. Who should that be? And, people are probably just like, say a name, get off the fence. I'm genuinely okay with it being a third forward signing or a really top overlapping left back. I prefer the overlapping left back because of what Rodrigo is and what I know that to be. And I actually would really like to go big in that sense. I would love for Arsenal to steal another marquee. We just did it with Rodrigo, but Rodrigo was more of a case of access to resources, right? Which is fine. I would like Arsenal to go to a big club, mate, and just be like, I want your player. Like, and to take them. I really think that would be huge. I don't know if we're at the position to do it now. I think that's the marker Berta could do. And I have a name. You're looking at Rodrigo. I think Alejandro Balde from Barcelona would be an incredible signing that really platforms the idea there, buys you a superstar talent, huge, all the big pluses. Wages are in line, superstar, needed at a big club, difficult to do, sends the right message, and walks in and is a starting upgrade to what we have in the position. I would love that. I think that would be brilliant. As far as the third attacker to complement the Sesko and the Rodrigo, look, mate, it's gonna sound greedy. I think you need a top touchline wing option at that point. And to me, it's about what we can do from a scope of like the funds. But I think getting the best touchline option that you can get, and I've said for me, Barcola is a superstar to really maximize that, or even a Nico Williams if you're able to still do. I see scope for the third attacker basically being that touchline wing option, because I think that Rodrigo is more of a second striker winger profile. So get a top touchline or a top left back. And I do have some cheaper alternatives because people are going to say, well, Balde's not there. So I will say Diego Moreira, who we will probably do a scouted on, is somebody that I love from Strasbourg. He is a phenomenal talent that I think has been Strasbourg's best player in Ligue 1. And, he played wing back this season, but I just think he's got a crazy amount of potential. And I think that would be like my cheaper left back. And then from the touchline options, you can look at Barcola, Nico Williams. And then outside of that, a name Cannon podcast people will know, but I maintain Asana Diao. I think that would be a crazy third signing. And yes, maybe it'll sound a little bit redundant, but he is going to explode personally. And he already did phenomenally for Como. Like, he's going up. So those would be my marquee and budget options for both the left wing and the left back. Your turn, good sir.
Also, just for context, if you can hear George's dog, it's not his stomach. It's just George's dog making a bit of noise in the background. Well, yeah, Kepa. I think I'm okay with that as the goalkeeping group. I think when I'm looking at realistically what's available in terms of who's out there, the sales, the finances, what else I want to spend. I think I'm okay with that. Vintage Alex closing his eyes. I've always looked at Maxime de Kuiper as if you're looking for the left-sided Ben White, that feels to me like the guy you go and do for that. Really good creative passer, similar stamina levels, similar levels of physical quality, I think, and a good defender as well. I still think we need a sort of right back, right centre back loan-ish thing to deal with the Tomiyasu situation, like maybe a prospect. I don't quite know who it is. There's a guy called Simic at Anderlecht who used to be at Milan, who I like. I've looked at and came up quite a few times in the numbers. Who's decent. He's a bit more sort of timbery, but he might be someone if you could do that on a small go. But yeah, in terms of the defenders, I'm probably going left and right. And it will depend on whether we get Rodrigo. But yeah, someone like a Theo Hernandez, I don't hate the Balde shout. In terms of other over left, as I say, Kuiper's my pick for the left back, but in terms of proper sort of bomb on fullback, so maybe we need to look into that a little bit more. In terms of the legs, if we're going premium, if we sold Martinelli or something, Carlos Baleba, I still look at and I go, if we could go and do that, if there's a possibility that you can go and get Carlos Baleba, you do that. If not, I think a Lucien Agume or an Onana at Aston Villa. 3 options there in different ranges of price. And then in the forward areas, again, it depends on Šeško Rodrigo, but say you did Šeško Williams. I hate the fact that Mbeumo's going to Man United. I really hate it. I really, really hate it. And I think if we could step in there, again, it would probably need a sale to do that. Well, definitely need a sale. Maybe even Martinelli and Trossard to go. But I'd look at that. And in terms of other forwards, I like the Diao shout. I always liked him when we looked at him on the scouted. I think Gittins, if Gittins is going for 35 million as a dribbler, we looked at him on the scouted, that again, as a value signing, because then he becomes someone who you're not paying top dollar for and you can allow to develop a little bit. I really don't hate that. Lots of names there, but I think realistically, the biggest issue for me that maybe we haven't brought up is the legs in the midfield. That's the question to me that I go, I think that's one of the biggest things that Arsenal fans in general aren't really talking about, is this other midfield signing. I really push back on the idea that we can get through with a Thomas Partey extension and Zubimendi. I don't buy that. I'm sorry. I think we need either Partey to go and you go and spend big. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of names there, but I think really for me, quite a significant portion of the budget. We all talking about the third forward, or maybe it's the left back or whatever, but I do think a big portion of the budget needs to go on that midfield, and that might need a sale. But we'll come to that many times over the summer. We should do like a proper, maybe go through each position and sort of coming in, but it depends on the links and stuff. But so yeah, we'll sort of come to that when it's more relevant. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate them. As always, you can get priority access to questions and stuff on Discord. So you can become that through a Patreon or YouTube member. You also get access to the data center, which they recorded, all the data sort of analytics and stuff from this season. They go into really good detail there. As we said, got a new show coming on Wednesday. And yeah, some exciting changes to the kind of podcast coming up soon, which we're about to have a meeting about. George, thank you, good sir. Oh, you're muted. Don't know what's going on. Anyway, whatever. George said thanks. Thank you for being here. Thanks so much for watching. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.